Hello everyone and welcome back to Replay Works and welcome back to another replay review. So we got another Eagle's Nest webcam locals. This one happened on August 20th. And yeah, Rush isn't dead obviously. It's still going to be around, it's a very good contender. And especially since the deck functions very fastly compared to other decks like the ramp deck or the blockers deck, it's going to be a strong competitor going into the competitive season, since we are going to be entering into regional season starting in September. So I think it's definitely something to keep a lookout for, right? But yeah, I might have spoiled it, but it did win this locals, which is great. We'll talk about that deck as we go through the video. But before we get into the rest of the review, just a quick reminder: if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you do enjoy this type of content where we talk about meta-analysis, where we talk about some of the statistics behind it, where we get to show some of the charts, and talk about some of the plays based on my speculation, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. This channel is growing very fast, and I'm definitely trying to see how far this can take it as we go and do these types of videos week on week. Alright? So, with that being said, let's jump right in. As I mentioned, we do see well, in this case it's marked as other, but it's really best classified as 1 Year War, blue-green rush, right? That deck did win, went 6-0 this tournament. Aside from that, we do see a lot of white-green Operation Meteor type decks running around. We don't see the Unicorn Tempo deck this tournament. Very interesting metric here. It actually fell off. And we do see red-blue still show up in the top 4 as well. And the one thing that's also interesting to me is that we do see the return of the coordinator deck, the white red, and that's going to be the honorable mention. That's going to be at the very end of the video, so you can skip all the way to the end if you want to take a look at that list. But with this, we know that, hey, there's one rush deck and it did win, right? At least in the top 8, right? And here are your color combinations, right? We have in your top 16, we have 6 green white, so definitely the favorite deck of this week. We have 4 red-blue, definitely, again, strong contender. I'm never going to discount red-blue as part of the meta. I think it's a really good meta call. If it's against a rush deck, it's a very good matchup. It can rush as well, so it's also a good choice against blue-white or green-white, depending on what your lower end is looking at, right? Then from here, we have blue-white. Two decks show up. One of them is the Unicorn Temple that we saw in the top 8. Another one's a green-blue, the winner, and then probably another one that's like between 9 and 16th place. We have a white-green. That's, to me, that's the main is Xeon plus a little bit of white package. That's why I classified that separate from the green-white Operation Meteor type decks. And then we have the red-white coordinator deck. That is going to be our honorable mention for today. So, in terms of overall colors play, there's actually pretty much the most even that we've seen it so far. Like, every color here is getting good representation, depending on what type of the mix is, depending on where it's from, but 10 out of the 16 decks are white, and then at least half of them either share red or blue. It's a very good mix where, again, we're not seeing things that are just saying, oh hey, blue and white are the best colors, period, in the game, every other color doesn't get represented, not that good. No. It depends on, again, what the meta's looking like, it depends on what the tournament's looking like, and I think right now we're starting to see it pretty even, where green and red, depending on the build, if you're playing 1 Year War Rush, if you're playing Operation Meteor, green's going to always be there in the meta, and red is always going to be there depending on if you're playing the coordinator deck, for example, or if you're repping the new Cyber New type ping deck, right? So I think this is really good. I like seeing this kind of even out. I'm hoping to see this as I look through more events going into this coming month, right, and going to September. And of course, here are your unit stat lines per level. Pretty standard stuff. Again, I'm just going to include this just to gloss over, just to show the visual. You can always track it week on week, but it's everything's pretty in line. I feel like this is going to be, I'm going to say this a lot, it's going to be more relevant as we see a more diverse card pool. Right now in set 1, I can make a case that 40% of the cards aren't going to be played. So we're always going to see the usual suspects show up in this list, right? Alright, so let's talk about the first place deck. Let's talk about the 1 Year War Rush deck, the blue-green, right? A lot of the low end, right? We see Gun Tank, Zaku 2, GM. The interesting thing there's no level 1 drops, no DOP, no Zaku 1, none of that. Everything here works on level 2, which is great because the 2-2 is a much better stat line than the 1-2 objectively. I think it makes sense, you know, you don't really need a turn 1 play, and it kind of rewards you for going second better, since you can put down, if you have the Zaku 2 that gets plus 2 AP, it's better, and then from there on the next turn you can start slamming down either 2-2s, or you can start put down the Char Zaku 2, right? This deck is running 2 Goofs. Goofs I think is a good going first card, just like Corsica base. It does get you an extra token, and most likely at that point in the game, if you're playing against a slower deck, they're not going to want to attack into the token, so it's pretty safe, even though it comes in play rested. And against another aggro deck, they could waste an attack against the token. I mean, I wouldn't call it a waste. It stops the token from getting a free shield hit, but it gives your opponent the quote-unquote bait for them to attack into the token if they want to, which isn't a bad deal for you, because you know, if you're going first, you maximize either playing this or Corsica base with all your resources. So, or you know, if you go in the Char route and you have the Char, you can play the Char and you can play the Zaku too, right? So it depends on your hand, but I think it's still a good like 1 card. Just put it down, you get a guy on the board, and whatever your opponent does with it, it's fine, because you know, if they want to waste their aggro on the token, that's good for them. And if they want to ignore it, also good for them, right? Better for you rather. So from here, we're seeing 3 Angshas, right? That's pretty cool tech that we're now seeing, just to deal extra ping damage. Like I said, hypothetically, if they attack the Zaku token, the 1-1, most likely they're going to attack into it with a 2-2, right? So that means when you put down the Angsha or the gun tank, those are going to be able to just ping off and deal the last damage to get rid of that card. So it's a nice little trade-off. It helps build back a little bit of a board state, especially when your opponents, they're not sure on what, you know, at that point you probably don't want to put it down too early. At that point in the game, you probably want to hold them back, let your opponent deal with, quote-unquote, deal with your board, and use the Angsha or gun tank to clean up the board from there, right? Depending on what they have. I think it works out really well. Then from here we have usual suspects, Char Amuro, 4/4, makes sense. But Amuro is the only thing that links with it is the Gundam. That's fine because you're really using him for his pair ability, so you can put him with anyone, and especially if you put him into the Char Zaku 2, the rare, it's still going to trigger the when destroyed when paired ability. So from here, we got 2 show resolves and 1 intercept orders. The 1 intercept orders is a fantastic card, especially when, let's say, you're A, trying to stop them to out aggro you, or B, if you're trying to use it on your main phase to try to push for a game if they put down, for whatever reason, they put down damage, if they have damage lift for it, if they put down Zawar. I think it works out very well, where you know it's essentially you can kind of push through a lot easier if they try to like wall up. Actually, fun fact, it also stops the strike token, that 3/3 that gets summoned from burst. So you know if you see that happen come out of burst, you can still play intercept orders, which is really a cheeky move to end the game, and like you know it tells them that like that burst didn't really matter. So Corsica base, we're gonna see a lot. We're gonna see this a lot more going into competitive season. I'm pretty sure this card is gonna be sticking around as probably one of the best bases in the game as of right now. But when looking at this, you know, you get the Tallgeese token early. You know, you get the 4/2 on turn 3. But then what I end up on reflection, I read this card as a better Fortress defense, because what I mean by this is that Fortress Defense is a level 5 2 cost that gets you 2 Zaku tokens, right? The 2 1/1s, right? And you can link it to link with Big Zam, I guess. But Corsica base, after you play the first one, the second ones will spawn the 2 Leo tokens, right? Now you actually don't care about what the affiliation of the cards on the field are. They're all 1/1s in the grand scheme of things. And again, it acts as a base, so you get the 05, you get the card from hand, and you get the extra 2 cards on the field. So it ends up being, I believe, objectively much better than Fortress Defense, where it's faster because you can technically play this back to back. Jury's out if it's good or not, but you could play this back to back on turns 3 and turns 4, right? So then you get the Tallgeese and you get the 2 Leos, right? You could do that. Versus Fortress Defense, where you have to wait till level 5, which is it should be the final turn for this type of deck. It should, like, if everything went right, you should be able to push for game at that point. So I think when I realized that, it's a much better card overall. It fits the theme of the deck. It definitely helps push the game faster. The Fall Mail is also good here. It gets the 3/1. It does come out, like, it's a little bit cheaper, so you can play this if you're going second. If you don't want to commit like a Sharzaku, if you don't have the pilot, or if you don't have any Sharzaku, it's just another good choice. Is you get the 3/1 token. It's gonna trade most likely pretty well if your opponent chooses to attack the token. Again, rested card this early in the game, your opponent's gonna you're gonna bait your opponent to either lose their aggro, lose their board against this type of deal, which I think is good. But yeah, overall, good to see the green-blue representation still show up in the tournaments, and I'm happy that this deck won, because it keeps the dream alive, right? We want to keep that rush alive because, well, you know, as a rush player, I'm very happy to see it. And then here's the breakdown, right? So between the two decks, we have 36, 37 units on hand. It looks like we're evening out at eight pilots. So we just have Amra, we just have Char. Those are the only two pilots we're playing. Averaging between 4 bases. So, you know, it depends if you want to play just the 3 Corsica bases, or, you know, 3 Famels. Or in this case, this first place deck ran 3 Corsica, 2 Famels, right? So I think that really depends on the command cards. It just depends. Like this deck was playing Short Resolve, Intercept Orders. Other decks can play, let's say, Siege Ploy, right? So it really depends on what you feel is necessary for that burst slot if needed, or if you need the draw power, right? And then average cards per level, right? We see that, okay, well, the first place deck played a lot of level 1s, but the second place deck played a lot of level 2s. Like level 2s is where these decks started to come in, right? Like at least 14 or 13 to 14 units in that slot. It probably could be more. You could play 16 like this first place deck, which is great. Again, depends on what you feel your strategy is. If you want the Dops, if you want the Zaku 1s, all power to you. If you don't need them, you don't feel like it's necessary, you use those slots, max out gun tank, max out GMs, everything from there, right? And then level 3, I think level 3 has been pretty consistent in the sense that we always see the Shars. We always see the Char Zaku 2, both versions, and you know this is where the bases start to come in, the Famels, Corsicas, etc. So that's where we start. 3 is where I think we are solidifying in that one, and level 4 in this case we're playing Angshas, we're playing Char's Gelgoog, we're playing the Gundam, so those always have, like, it's a little bit of a flux in terms of ratios, because I think Angshas are like a new-ish addition to this deck, but you know we're always going to see like Amro show up here, so. But then after that, there's no point in playing anything higher because this game is supposed to end by turn 5, like, in an ideal world. Turn 6, you know, is most likely the scenario, but it is possible to end the game on turn 5. Okay, and then we got your stats breakdown. So again, rush deck. You want to play low to the curve. In terms of costing, your HP, you don't really need too much HP since your guys are going to go in. And yeah, because you're playing gun tanks, so it's going to bring in your average for level 2s. Level 3 is always going to be a little bit higher just because the Sharzakus are 3/2s. And level 4 is always going to be about even, depending on the Gelgoogs and the Gundams. In this case, Amish is also like floating around, you know? And then here's your link. Alright, I'll be honest, I think it's mostly just going to be the Zakus, the Gelgoog, and the Gundam. The Goof, man, if someone plays a Ramboral for the link, that'll be funny. But Ramboral is not that good of a card compared to like Mukube. Just a note there. And for some reason my other Zaku 2 got cut off, but whatever. We know those are there on the back. Alright, so let's move on to second place. And you know, we're gonna talk about the green-white deck. We haven't done this in a while. I believe it's been like, what, 2-ish videos? But there are some changes to what I've seen before in this list, so I wanted to talk about it. So we have, for this deck, and let's just toggle between the 11th place deck. This is the other deck that I found. These ones I felt were similar but a little bit different, since the other decks were mostly kind of the same to the second place deck. But the commonalities between this is that they're both playing the Launcher Strike Gundam, which I believe is a really good level 4 going second card. If you don't get your ramp, And it looks like these decks are toning down the ramp because this second place deck only plays 4 bird mode. They don't play any invitations. And then this 11th place deck doesn't play any bird modes or ramp at all. Right? So if you're going second with this deck, it's great because you can go turn 2 Lift, turn 3 Launcher Strike, and it fits the theme of the deck. So he's trying to want to play good blockers. He also is a link unit with Kira, so later on it does have the extra potential to link, right? Because they're not playing Perfect Strike anymore. It seems that like we have moved a little bit away from playing Perfect Strike just to play Launcher Strike. Because again, comes out a turn earlier, doesn't have that weird deployability that's gonna like bounce something that has 1 HP, so it's a little bit awkward, especially if it's you're targeting you can only target a link unit, right? You don't want to do that. So I think Launcher Strike is a great addition. I've always been a fan of this card ever since the booster draft when this deck came out, just because I like its stat line. I like that it's a link effect, and I like that it's level 4. This deck didn't. I used to say this deck doesn't have a level 4. Well, now we're starting to see that this deck starts to come into its own with that level 4. And by playing that, you're playing a ton of like 12 blockers that are like lower cost. So now your Archangel is actually a lot better early on, since you start swinging against 3/4 stat line. If you link Kira with it, it's 5/5, and then your Kira gets to -2 AP, so you get to do that a turn early, just to start kind of pushing back on board a little bit. And the Archangel helps you, like next turn, obviously, reactivate your guys, right? So you can be a little bit aggressive with this if needed, if it's like an emergency that early in the game, right? The 11th place deck is playing Kusanagi, that returns something that has 3 HP or less. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Kusanagi. I think returning a 3 HP card is it can be a double-edged sword, right? Because if you look at, let's say you're playing the mirror match, right? If you look at the list from second place, ask yourself, what are you bouncing back with this card? It's either going to be a damaged unit that's a blocker, like your Lifrit, the Ultra Strike, or the Ale Strike, or a damaged Wing Gundam that's already linked, or on the other side, if it's not linked, it's going to be Bird Mode, which you don't want to really put back in your hand, or Zawart, which is like kind of, I guess, a freebie. If you're like it bounces back to Zawart, but you don't really care about Zawart, if that makes sense. It's like the targets against that. Kusanagi is more geared for against a rush deck to deter them from putting down too many units, or putting down a unit, like let's say for example they slam the boards with like, I don't know, like a bunch of Char Zaku 2 and they don't link them, right? You can bounce it back with Kusanagi. It's fine, but as we see from the decks, or at least from the first place deck, the other targets we have, Angsha, we have Gundam, right? That's going to be probably linked. We have, the 2/2 vanillas, which is fine, but if you're spending 2 resources to bounce a 2/2 vanilla, I don't think it's the best use, right? That's just my little personal feelings about this. In this case, back to the first place deck, we are seeing Striker Pack, right? No, I guess Kusanagi does bounce back the Striker Pack tokens. Since we are seeing a lot of those float around, it does bounce back Talgis. Still fine. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just better as token removal as opposed to like anything on the board, personally. But yeah, we're seeing Striker Pack play here. Ale Strike at 2. We're seeing like pretty much a strong blocker early on package, and for me, it makes sense. This deck needs the blockers early on. And then you're also running 2 Kiras here, so you're able to kind of link those as needed. It makes sense not to run too many Kiras, since they only link with, well, in this case, Kira only links with 4 units, so you don't want to clog the hand. And then we have the usual suspects: Duo, Hero, Wing Gundam 0, Death Scythe, all maxed out. Path to Victory Defeat at 3, which, I mean, to me it's either or. You either max out on Path to Victory, go less on Death Scythe, Wing Gundam, or you do the opposite. I don't think this is a wrong choice. I think both are fine options depending on the player, depending on which ones you feel is more necessary. And then we have Underground Desert Base at 3, so we took an extra copy to fit that Archangel in. So I think that's pretty clean in my opinion. Okay. And then the 11th place deck, we're seeing things like Hawk Endymion, Unforeseen Incident, right? So like some action step cards, which is useful. It's good. I can see like the combat tricks are needed, especially when they're playing 4 Kiras and they have 8 Link units. So it seems like this deck is definitely more focused around maintaining board presence versus trying to slow down your opponent so you can get your Wing or Death Scythe on board on turn 6 or on level 6. Yeah, actually, the Hakademi is also interesting because it links with Launcher Strike technically, so you can do that whenever you want. Yeah, I mean, like I can see that this deck definitely try to play more units, just trying to make sure that it's able to put down a strong statted unit every turn, starting on level 3. If it goes second, that's even better for it. If it goes first, fine, you just play Zaward, right? And then yeah, just from there, go up, until you hit your level 6. It's gonna be a little bit of a slower deck since it's not playing the ramp, but this deck aims to just slow the game down just by playing Hawk and Unforeseen Incident, and and Kusanagi, right? Kusanagi is basically another Hawk. All right, so here's your breakdowns. It's a bit all over the place since you do have 6 decks, and there are quite a different number of ways to do the ratios in this, but generally 27, 28 units. We see that between 10 and 11 pilots. In this case, 11 players had 12 pilots, but second place had 10, so I think trying to stay on the lower end, 10, 11 is what we see in trend. Command cards, we have about lean towards 7, so Unforeseen Incident and Path to Victory or Defeat, those are the 2 cards that are probably coming to mind first as a command choice. Depends if you want to play 3-3 or 4-3 or whichever ratios. Get your bases. I think 5 bases is also pretty common nowadays. 5 bases seems to be common across the board. In this case, these 2 decks that we showed only had 4 bases. So really, I believe 4 bases was always more common in this type of deck, but it looks like we're seeing decks that are playing more than 4 just to have like better defense on that side. And the command pilots, that's just the Hakademi that we saw on the list, right? So that does get thrown into that mix as a choice. And then for the average cards per level, I don't have much to say on this one. I think it's interesting that if you look at the level 4 slot, the quote-unquote average is 1 for units, when I believe those are the only 2 decks that were playing Launcher Strike, because 6 in total divided by 6 decks is 1. So these are the only 2 decks that played Launcher Strike, and I wanted to highlight that because I do like that as a card choice. So, and then here's your average of the stat lines as well. Just keep that in mind. Level 5 is when you get Ale Strike and Perfect Strike if it's still running around. It kind of is because it's 3.8. Level 4 is when you there's Launcher Strike from there. 6 Wing Gundam, Death Scythe, all from there, right? Yeah, just keep that in mind. It's always good to know, just to see where these are heading. Just to be updated. And here's your link units, right? We see Bird Mode, Launcher Strike, Ale Strike, Death Scythe, Wing Gundam 0. So pretty clean. Launcher Strike is a new addition to this list. We took out Freedom, we took out Perfect Strike from this list. So yeah, I mean, they can start linking at level 4 with Kira, or level 5 with the Ale Strike. But realistically, level 6 is when you're most likely gonna see link after link after link, right? Death Scythe into Wing Gundam, probably another Wing Gundam to be honest. But yeah, those are like the commonplace ones. All right. So moving on from here, let's talk about the blue-red Cyber new type. Yeah. So this is a 3rd place deck, and just a couple of call-outs here. The Zaku Mariner and Gin, there's really no difference between them except for a psychological component, because if your opponent sees that you're playing 2 different red 2/2s, it's just there to confuse them. Or in Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day, we would try to avoid playing different rarities of cards because then it would tell your opponent how many of the rarities you're playing. In this case, it's doing the opposite, where it's showing, hey, we're playing 2 different types of cards that are functionally the same, just to tell your opponent, hey, I might be playing more than, look at it, it's 2 and 1. It could easily have been 3 and 3 of Gins or 3 of Zaku Mariners, right? But no, it's just there as like a confusion tactic, so your opponents keep them guessing, right? Tangent aside, we have this is, so to me, this is interesting. One vanilla Kashtira. I think we've seen this card go down ever so slightly over the list, down to 1. Yeah, I think between 1 and 2 is correct now, because like Angsha is a much better, like more versatile, I would say. You want to save your links, especially if you're playing towards big Kshatriya and the Banshee, right? Those are the 2 cards that link with Merida. And I think those are much better to link with Merida, because you're gonna get the you proc the Kshatriya, you get the multiple proc with the Banshee. You don't, I feel like you don't really want to see it used up on your level 4 play on a vanilla. Personal opinion. Yeah, I think that's just how I see that going that route. I think it makes sense to drop it down, so you can focus on having the Gundam, which is your armor turn, or Angsha, which is just, you can deal 1 damage for anything, which is, if you think about it, Angsha deals 1 damage to something, Kshatriya plus Merida Link, it's functionally the same thing, because it has to swing at something, your opponent's most likely going to kill it, so it only really dealt 1 damage, right? But, I think the 1 is just there as a cheap Link option, in case things go south, so, it's still a valid choice to put in the deck. I'm not saying take it out. Then from here, we have 3 Vesalius and 2 Corsica. Again, Corsica is just going to be around for a long time. I think it's a really good going first card, no matter what deck it's played in. Especially when you look at this deck, you have, if you want to try to rush, you got the Resols and the 1/1s. There's just 7 of them in the deck. And then you have Gun Cannon for later on, but you can't really link because you're not playing Sayla on turn 3 with Gun Cannon. So, it's there as just like a Amuro combo play. Yeah, and then we have the 1 Battle of Aces. If it comes up in burst, fantastic. You're gonna be able to stop a rush and ruin their turn most likely. But yeah, I think between that and 9th place, a lot of similarities. It's actually funny because 3rd place isn't playing Gun Tank; it's just playing the 2/2 vanillas, right? In this deck is a little bit more geared towards the, I would say, the white base side of things, right? It's playing 4 Gun Tank, 4 G Fighters, 2 Gun Cannon. It's playing the Sayla, so it has a lot of targets that you can link with Sayla, like Gun Cannon, G Fighter, and then it also has like the G Fighter is able to do unblockable stuff, which is good. If you need the extra push in the deck. Yeah, and then for me, the card that draws my eye is Kai's Resolve. To 1 of, it heals, but it's also an Earth Federation white base pilot. So you could link it with the G Fighter and Gun Cannon as necessary, so you have 7 pilots that would do that. Me, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, you can just heal big Kshatriya after you do a Merida turn, swing or something, right? Because it only has 5 HP, right? If we know that on average AP is around 2 to 3, it's gonna take 3 between that round. It's gonna have like between 2 or 3 HP left over. So Kai's Resolve kind of full heals it back up to 5. So your opponent's going to have to swing something into a 7/5 stat line. So I think that helps the longevity of that card as well. But yeah, it being a 1 of, I don't think there's any harm in it, especially when they're committing a lot on the being able to link with the white base team, right? I think that's like a dual purpose card where if you use it for the pilot, that's good. For like the extra link, if you use it for the effect, even better, because like I think it's a really good momentum shift. Yeah, and I mean these decks are always playing Vesalius, makes sense. You want to pump up your little weenie 2/2s into 3/2s, and then makes Resol into a 5/3, so it helps get to certain thresholds. I think if you're playing red, there's no reason not to play Vesalius, just because I think it's that versatile of a card. Okay, and now here's the breakdowns. 32 units, pretty clean. Pilots between 8 or 9, mostly towards 8. Merida and Amuro being the 2 of choice. Commands, you got 5, so you get your show resolves. I think it's fine as is. The deck doesn't really need to play more than 5 or 6 commands. Bases between 4 and 5, so dealer's choice. If you want to play the Corsicas, probably lean towards a 5. If you want to just commit to the 4 Vesalius for consistency, also fine. Depends on your playstyle. And the command pilot, that's just the one random Kai that we saw, right? And then you have your average cards per level. Again, leaning towards the low end. You're gonna see a lot of level 2s here because it can function as a rush deck if it needs to. But then like Level 4 is pretty similar to the green-blue deck, where level 4s are pretty set in stone. It's just a matter of ratios. And then from there, level 5s is going to be Big Kshatriya, level 6 is your Banshee, right? So those I think are always in flux. I think we've seen like 4 and 2 or 3 and 2 or 3 and 3. It's like a weird, depends on how you feel as a player, how fast you can either, if you want to see more Kshatriyas, great. If you want to see Banshee, try to get the effective proc off, more power to you. Just depends on if you can get that 13, And then here's your AP, HP, and costs as well. Just to show that off, just keep that in mind. It's really funny because like level 5 and level 6 is the same curves, because the joke is that Merida only brings Kshatriya and Banshee up to 5 HP, so it's always going to be able to be targeted by Siege Ploy. It's really just a weird, well, I mean, it's not weird, but it's probably on purpose from a design standpoint, but it's just funny. When my playtest partner George pointed that out to me, I was like, huh, that's keeping it consistent, Alright, and then here's your link units, depending on what deck you're going to see, right? You got Gun Cannon, Gundam, Kshatriya 1, Kshatriya 2, and then the Banshee. Those, I think, are going to be 5 pretty simple stuff. You're always going to see those running around the deck. So we saw with the white base focus deck, more towards the G Fighter, the gun cannons as well. So those kind of had a bigger showing in that type of deck. But roughly you can just assume if they're not playing the white base variant, it's really hard because if they're not playing it, they're not going to show that they're playing Sayla until they do the gun cannon Sayla on turn 3. But generally looking at general trend of the deck, they won't be able to start linking until level 4, right? That's mostly going to be Gundam, and if they want to use a Merida early on that level 4 vanilla Kshatriya, also fine. But again, level 5 is when you should expect big Kshatriya, Merida link, boom, things are dying on the field. Alright, and now to round out the video, we have our red-white honorable mention list, right? So it's the coordinator list, and I like looking at these because as they pop up here and there, they're just every now and then they come up to remind us that they're existing in the meta. And this one is interesting because it has ZNO, and I think that's a card that we haven't seen yet, where it gets first strike when attacking or in combat against a level 2 enemy unit. So it's going to kill off any 2/2s when it's attacking, I believe. Yep, during your turn. So it's going to kill off any of those weenies. It's a good counter rush card. It's also a link unit, so you can link it with Yazak or Atherin, and it will trigger Atherin's when linked ability because it is zapped. So I think it's a really fine addition. Like, if you can get that off the top with dual Gundam Assault Shroud and you have the one extra resource left, it's going to be a really strong. Like, you have 2 cards that are linked to that point. Since the dual Gundam Assault Shroud does have 8 pilots to link with it, Yazak and Atherin. The rest of the deck is, as you would imagine, very similar to what we've seen in other Zaf builds. Dual Gundam, MA mode, Buster Gundam. The Aegis Gundam's a good choice here. It's a meta call, especially when you're playing against either white-blue, green-white. Those are 2 decks that Aegis Gundam really does shine against that. Since you don't need to be linked for it, you can just pump it up by 1 somehow. Actually, you're not playing Vesalius, you have to link at that point. Or you can use Buster Gundam or Baku. You don't really need the base if you don't need it in the deck, right? So yeah, Baku, Buster Gundam, those help Aegis Gundam push forward. And since we are playing dual Gundam, it does make more sense that we're not playing any bases, we're not playing any more commands than we need to. We're only playing 4 Overflowing Affection, 12 pilots because there's a lot of link targets here. Or Kira's is an overall good link. Ironically, in the Zaf deck, Kira is a really good pilot to play because it gives 2 attack and it reduces AP on swing, so it ends up helping the deck a lot more because like if you pair it with Buster Gundam, it triggers the effect. You pair it with Dual Gundam, it triggers the effect. You usually get the link bonus, but you pair it with Dual Gundam, like the regular Dual Gundam, it just gets Breach 3 and then you're 5 on its own, right? So it kind of helps like as the best pilot for that, right? Atherin for there, better with the Aegis Gundams because you have to, and you also have to save 1 for Justice Gundam so you can swing for 2 damage to try to end the game. So it's a really interesting deck in terms of you gotta know when to link and when to pair with the off without like using up either your Atherins. I think Yazak can just keep throwing at guys, honestly, just to get your link on, just because he's level 3. So it does trigger what, Dual Gundam, Xeno, and the other Dual Gundam, right? But yeah, I think it's just another target that can trigger Basuda also. Yeah, I mean, I like the deck a lot. It's something that is percolating. We see it pop up again here and there, but I think it's just about, I don't know, it's one of those decks where it's hard to gauge where it is just because there's so many different ways to build it, and it's all gonna be meta call versions. Yeah, like this one's not playing any of the Lagoi. Lagoi is a better card against rush decks, right? But this deck is focusing more on the breach side of things, for duels, for Aegis, right? And the Baku to kind of boost them up. So, it's one of those meta call decks. I wouldn't be surprised if someone really knew the meta going into a regionals and then somehow not somehow, but like they purposely tuned it to counter a lot of the meta, and then they went into top, right? So, you know, I just want to keep this in mind that this is going to be around. Just, you know, if we see it perform more, we'll see it perform more. But until then, you know, we'll just keep tabs on it. And that's it. So that's it for this week's replay review. We've got hopefully more coming up as I get more data. But I just want to say thank you for everyone who's listened all the way to the end of the video, because these videos are long. I ramble a lot. I have tangents every now and then. But it means a lot that you listen through. Definitely means a lot that you're subscribed to the channel, and definitely means a lot that you are supporting a channel that's doing things a lot differently from other channels that we see from Gundam. So I do appreciate all that. With that being said, I will try to keep this as close to the tournament dates as possible, depending on my personal schedule, but I'll try to always at least pump out one review per week as long as I have data. Okay? All right, with that being said, I'll see everyone in the next one, and you have a fantastic day.